let's go ahead and get into the incredible news right now. Well, what came out today? After 6 months of obfuscation and absconding, the Justice Department released some of the thousands of documents that Congress has requested. And guess what we found out? Well, my viewers, my listeners found nothing out new. But it is big national news story, Fox News, Associated Press. U.S. government used taxpayer funds to buy and then sell weapons during Fast and Furious, documents show. It reports huge fights at the ATF headquarters in Phoenix, with their agents refusing to go along with it, when it was learned that in one case alone, 2,000 firearms were actually directly delivered by the ATF to the Sinaloa drug cartel. That's the #1 drug cartel in the north of Mexico. That's the folks that were in the news today killing a newspaper editor of the big newspaper in Nuevo Laredo, one of their editors, because she dared criticize them on her Facebook. They cut her head off. And guess who's given the guns to Sinaloa? I'm pretty close to the border. Well, I guess I better actually stand up to it or I have no future. But that's the type of mafia corruption we're dealing with here. Sinaloa are the people who, it came out in federal documents a month ago, but Fox News and others don't report on this. It came out in federal filings that they declared national security when one of their leaders got extradited here, and that they were working for the U.S. government and were allowed to ship in tens of tons of pure cocaine into the U.S. in the last 5 years if they would wage war against the other cartels that weren't laundering their money through private Federal Reserve branch banks. And here is United Press International. U.S. News. Court documents say U.S. knew about coke. That's from back on August 4th. U.S. officials let the Sinaloa drug cartel smuggle tons of cocaine in the United States in exchange for intelligence about rival cartels. Court documents say it was actually if they would launder their money through U.S. banks. And here's the El Paso Times reporting on the same thing. Now, when you read the Fox News story, it tells you it was Sinaloa cartel that was sent the guns. But they don't mention the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Good day. I would say good day, but this important TV transmission is not over yet. You see, a lot of mainstream media, when they're forced to, will give you the story, but only a snapshot of what just happened, not how it's interconnected. Sinaloa is allowed to control the border state regions, bringing in $500 billion a year in cocaine and heroin and marijuana. It's laundered through big, globalist, anti-American banks. The U.S. is always getting the blame for putting tyrants in Mexico and suppressing Mexico and blocking democratic revolutions in Mexico. And I guess at the end of the day, yes, the American people have allowed foreign banks to come in and dominate us and then dominate Mexico. But the American people are naive to this. We're here to wake you up about it. But our criminal government is financing the Sinaloa cartel to kill other cartels that don't launder their money through U.S. banks and try to keep the money in Mexico. I'm not saying they're humanitarians, but that's what's happening. And that's why Sinaloa is starting to lose their fight down there, because the other cartels are pushing them out. And they're down there killing 3 journalists in the last week who dared report on this. And that's in the Associated Press today. So that's what's really going on down there. And finally, we're starting to get some of these documents. And of course, the Attorney General has been caught perjuring himself. It's just amazing to realize that we have a mafia, drug-dealing, gun-running government who isn't content to bring in the drugs and destabilize Mexico. And now I've learned it's 40,000 dead in the last 3 years. That's worse than Vietnam from this situation. They're not content. Then they've got the chutzpah, or the bravado, or the arrogance, the hubris is even a better word, to then blame the Second Amendment and try to take my right to a Second Amendment to defend myself away from me. This is incredible. All right, I'm done talking about that. Let's shift gears to the real kingpins, the top of the pyramid when it comes to this global mafia. I'm talking about, of course, a memo that Zero Hedge got that the Federal Reserve has since confirmed is theirs. Boy, Zero Hedge has good sources inside the enemy operation. That the Fed, the private Federal Reserve that calls itself the Fed, is busy monitoring all conversations on the web and has put out more bids for tech companies to track anyone criticizing them on the blogosphere or in mainstream media, old line media, so they can counter them. Well, good job getting that scoop, Zero Hedge, but it was Infowars.com back in 2009 that was sent from good sources inside the Army who are patriots, the fact that the U.S. Army was sent out to end the Fed demonstrations in Houston and in Dallas. Ron Paul was in Houston protesting at the Fed. I was in Dallas, and it turned out that the Liberty Restoration Project and, of course, Infowars.com were sent the documents, and there it is on your screen, that the Army intelligence through Army Reserve domestically was spying on our events and had us listed as violent terrorists because we want to end the private banking dictatorship over the U.S. that runs the drugs and is destabilizing the entire hemisphere. That we were listed as terrorists, and they even told the Army soldiers there in plain clothes, don't let them know you're from the military or they might try to kill you. Here's some video of that peaceful protest where we were just there in a jovial fashion exposing the banksters.
Hey, I want to talk to the workers up there on the parapet, the ones smoking cigarettes and just jump back. You're with the American people, we know that, but understand, ask the workers inside. You're not in a federal government building. You're in a private Federal Reserve that uses that name as a fraud. That'd be like if my first name was Federal Reserve Jones. I'm still not the federal government. I'm not a federal agency. But if I said my name was Federal Reserve, I could go out and pay off politicians and get them to allow me to get into power so I could issue the currency and credit, and then I could buy up the world. That's what these criminals have done.
Again, this is the illegitimate crew that's hijacked our government, that's put us deep in debt through derivatives, debts they created that we don't owe. This is the enemy, and that's why they're panicking, because in most polls, more than 85% of the American people know the Federal Reserve is the financial dictatorship of this country. I saw polls out of Mexico where they're more sophisticated in many ways than Americans. They know it's a global banking cartel that's destroying Mexico. Everyone in the world, whether you live in Europe, Asia, Latin America, or North America, whether you live in Canada or the U.S., this is the enemy. And they are the El Jefes. They are the boss of our society now, to the point of little old Ron Paul, a doctor, can't go protest outside the Fed 3 years ago without the Army being there in plain clothes. That's because we're going after the real power structure. The people that are running the drugs, the people that are funding the drug gangs, the people that are shipping guns to drug gangs in Illinois and Florida and Texas. All of that's come out too. It's not just cocaine into the U.S. that they're allowed to ship in on record, federal court, U.S. government documents admitting it, or guns down there. They blame our Second Amendment. It's just too incredible.